Eminent domain. You heard of it? Do you know what it is? If you don't, I can educate you a little bit. Uh, First, I'm going to start with this article, and then it'll probably educate you a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about my own personal sort of situation where, you know, it, you'll see. I'm going to share a story, and you'll see how it relates to me in that story. So this is from, I don't even know this, U.S. News? Smaller outlet, I guess, but, you know, whatever. So I don't have any opinion on how they're right. We'll see how it goes. So it's just titled "Our Government Overlords." So I'm going to read this article here. John Locke explained the primary role of government in 1689, writing, "The great and chief end, therefore, of men uniting into commonwealths and putting themselves under government is the preservation of their property." But as axiomatic as this might have become over the next 250 years, many people who work in government at every level seem to have forgotten this aspect of their jobs, and sadly, that's the most charitable possibility. This was brought into full public view recently when Dallas Councilwoman Sandy Grayson lamented, on camera no less, that a citizen would have the temerity to fight back in court as the city attempted to take his land through a condemnation proceeding. So they come in, condemn the property for whatever purpose that they desire to use that property for the good of public, and you as the property owner is just supposed to say, okay, cool, just take it, I guess, and pay me a pittance for it and not be able to fight back. That's basically what she's saying here. She said, with no apparent sense of understanding that the citizen in question was fighting to keep his own property. It's just infuriating that if you are rich enough, you can hold the city hostage for years and then get what you want. There's something really wrong with that. According to this government employee, there's something wrong with people maintaining ownership of their property if the government wants it. The councilwoman knew she, and by extension the Dallas city government, was in the wrong too, as she admits that in the end we're settling because he will probably win. So that's kind of funny in a way. So basically, what you're saying is, it sucks that this entity, this guy, we'll say, because it's really a business entity, has the power to fight back against the government and actually retain their property. Because realistically, whenever we want to use, you know, eminent domain on someone else, they don't have the means to fight us, and they just have to give in. That's in a nutshell what she's saying. Turns out the government cannot simply wave a magic wand and condemn a property. In this case, because of the desire to run a water pipeline through it, there are rules that at least some portions of the government still see fit to follow. But as the councilwoman noted, the citizen in question here, hotel magnate Monty Bennett, had more than enough money to fight for the right to keep his own land. Most other people are not so well situated, and with them, government at all levels is much more ham-fisted in its approach. People often lose their property simply because government wants it for some other reason. Eminent domain and civil asset forfeiture proceedings prove as much beyond any doubt. Okay, so the difference between an eminent domain and a civil asset forfeiture is one is by necessity, the government's necessity for, say, the betterment of society. For example, running a water line, or a border wall, let's say, or something like that. Whereas civil asset forfeiture is when they do it due to some type of crime, or the proceeds are being used for something that will break a crime, like, or will break the law. So that's the difference between that. Eminent domain is one of those uncomfortable legal principles that nearly everyone agrees to, or agrees is necessary, but no one wants to apply to them. The principle is that when the government has the right to confiscate property, provided that it uses the property for the common good, and that it compensates the owner for the fair market value of the property. Even those who find the principle distasteful would agree that that is reasonable. After all, without eminent domain, a single recalcitrant, oh, wow, recalcitrant, that's a word, property owner could stand in the way of a project that promised to benefit tens or even hundreds of thousands of people. In practice, however, neither common good nor fair market value mean what reasonable people would assume. Most people naturally assume that the common good is something that benefits the entire community. The definition courts have accepted, though, has been more expansive. In the landmark 2005 case, Kelo versus the City of New London, state and local officials wanted to spur economic development in New London, Connecticut. Officials convinced a very large pharmaceutical company to build a $300 million research facility on land that was largely, though not entirely, owned by the city. The problem was that Suzette Kilo's home was on some property, some of the property this large pharmaceutical conglomerate wanted. The city of New London claimed that the large pharmaceutical conglomerate facility would create 1,000 new jobs, bring new commerce to the city, and would generate more tax revenue, which the city would then be able to spend for the common good. While the government is not permitted to use eminent domain simply to take property from one person and give it to another, even if the first person is compensated, it may take property from one person and give it to another if use by the public is the purpose of the transfer. So, see, in this situation, it's obvious that um, they're doing it. It's a weird thing there because I understand that, yeah, it's for the good of the community. Essentially, if there all these thousands jobs are, or this 1,000 jobs are created, but it's you're taking it from one entity and giving it to another entity, right? So that's kind of a weird caveat of this whole thing. Okay, so it says here, in his dissent, Justice Clarence Thomas said that if, as the court claimed, economic development is an acceptable example of common good, then there is no instance in which a government could not take private property. Well said. It's really smart. Very, I mean, Clarence Thomas is a very smart Supreme Court justice. So since Kelo, there is effectively no such thing as private property. All property is now simply held by people in trust until such time as the government decides that it wants it, or, more disturbingly, would rather that someone else have it. Thomas was right, of course. He was also in the minority. Okay, this article keeps going on a little bit. I'm not going to read the rest of the article. I'm going to talk about my sort of situation that happened to me. I've been looking for a cottage recently to buy one, and I found one on some waterfront property up in the Muskokas, which is in Canada and cottage country. And unfortunately, due to a very large flood back in 2019, there is a new proposed floodway for that region. So this cottage I was looking at just happens to lie 100% in this floodway. And new bylaws state that in this floodway, you cannot build and you cannot um, alter in any way the land. So making effectively that land useless. So that essentially is another way of exercising, uh, you know, what do you call it? Uh what's whatever domain. Why am I looking? Eminent domain. I'm I'm trying to blank there. Uh, so another way of just exercising that without actually having to do anything. You just say, hey, this is now for public safety that we need to have this section as runoff for you know for winter melt off, and such because this apparently was like 100-year event. And so, I mean, I don't own this property now. I was looking to buy it, and it was listed. Just strange because it should have been dezoned. Um, but now the people that own this property, how are they ever going to sell it? Basically, they have expensive, you know, waterfront tent property. Like, what are you going to do? There's a cottage there, but it's been condemned. Power's been cut from it. You can't get power connected back to it. And you can't build. You can't alter it. So you're screwed. So this whole idea that this eminent domain is something that we allow government to just have power to do on a whim is kind of like the tail wagging the dog, isn't it? Like if the government are there in our best interest, they're people, group of people that are there for our best interest, then how do they make these decisions arbitrarily against us? It's a very strange sort of situation. And I know if I were the owner of this property, I would be pretty upset. But in the interim, I guess eminent domain. Careful. If you own something, you never know if you actually technically own it until again, until Uncle Sam comes a knocking.